This game is kind of difficult to talk about because honestly, it's not really good, but it also doesn't completely suck. It has some interesting ideas, it has some great art, but I still don't feel like Evil West, it's not really fun to play. But let's talk about that. What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here. Hi, this is my brutally honest review. Please like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. So let's begin with the obvious. What is Evil West? On the surface, I have to say that this feels like it's trying to be the next hack and slash action game. It feels like a very low budget Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, one of those games that has you trying to pull off really long combos and big takedowns, a game that gives you infinite ammo and lots of cool guns to use. But as much as it has that style, it really lacks substance. It doesn't ever feel good to defeat even the biggest, baddest vampires. Everything is very, very hollow. In Evil West, we play as a legendary vampire hunter named Jesse, who's on a quest to stop some sort of mysterious event called the Gathering. It seems like all the vampires on the planet are very, very focused on seemingly taking over America by using some weird, creepy new magic, which seems to be making the vampires much bigger and much, much stronger. Thankfully, Jesse is not completely defenseless. The reason this is an alternate history is not only is there obviously vampires all over the place, but for some reason, humans have steampunk technology. Electronic gauntlets, the ability to seemingly teleport to opponents, even doing things like breaking illusion magic, which they call glamours. I don't know why they say that instead of glamour. Now let's go deep onto the combat, because if I'm just being incredibly brutal here, the story blows. I mean, these characters don't really matter that much. It's kind of just an excuse to fight big old ghoulies in the darkness. Now, the biggest thing about this is that everything inside of Evil West works. Nothing is broken, nothing felt glitchy, nothing feels out of place. My biggest problem is that you can really feel the low budgetness of this. It feels like an incredibly tiny indie experience because a lot of times lower budget games do not have that full depth you're trying to experience. Throughout the course of the campaign, there's 16 main missions we have to beat, and to be quite frank, they're incredibly basic. A lot of times there's no exploration, they're very, very linear, and this brings me to the best and the worst part of Evil West. I do love the art style. I think that alternate histories are incredibly riveting. I've read stuff like Scott Snyder's American Vampire, or even things like Harry Turtledove's Guns of the South. I really like alternate history based specifically on the Wild West. So it's very weird that this time they have nailed the aesthetic. I think a lot of times getting a chance to check out creepy empty railway stations or like a haunted spooky forest, that looks great until you keep running into the same thing. As you go through these areas, you keep just stumbling upon these exact same arenas. Like 99% of all the fights in this game are an almost perfect circle that you fight people in. It's either a circle or a rectangle, and there's no cool like things to hide behind. There's no chance to jump on stuff. There's no like platforming. And that brings me to the other downside of this, which is that straight up the combat is too easy to just use repetitiously. I do feel like good depth in action games lets you create combos. Like if you're playing something like, obviously the pinnacle of RPGs or action games is something like Devil May Cry, because you can figure out, all right, weak attack, strong attack, trying to chain together some bullets and stuff. You can do that in this, but in my experience, you can kill every single enemy in this game by just teleporting to them, which electrocute stuns them, and then beating them to bits. And then you can even go into the talent trees and upgrade these abilities to make it so that your combo explodes, to make it so your teleports increase the damage of your next couple hits. I could just defeat the entire game teleport punching everybody. And that's the other part of this, is that while it is possible to shoot, this is not a third-person shooter. If you were intending to watch the trailers and had the idea of going like full gun spec, it's not really possible. Tapping the trigger does do a little tiny bit of break damage to help stagger them eventually, but other than trying to push people past their break point to do an instant takedown, I really didn't shoot that much. If I did shoot, if you hold left trigger and press right trigger, this uses your rifle, which allows you to do headshots. But even still, it feels dramatically weaker than just punching people with your electric fists. So because of that, I felt like I didn't really use stuff very often. The only time I really pulled the trigger or actually aimed my gun is to detonate an explosive barrel or to shoot like a flying enemy. But this brings me to the other part of the game that actually I did kind of hate. Early on, there are some very dramatic looking boss fights. I think some of the super vampires we encounter are really, really beautiful to look at. They have good animations. They got like tattered ribbons hanging off them and stuff. I think that this is incredibly cool. But every boss you fight becomes a normal, random enemy later on. So you fight this big, unique looking monster. That's great. Well, now you're just going to be fighting him in packs of dudes for the rest of the game. So it makes it where all the specialness, all the charm, all those interesting little encounters become incredibly boring since they just get recycled again and again and again. Fighting 5 big vampires that are immune to stun is not really interesting, but it's also not really hard. I'm just going to keep teleporting. I'm going to keep trying to unleash my super attacks. I'm just going to keep trying to basically survive long enough to do another takedown. Now that does bring me to the takedown system and how health works. So you do notice that there's 2 separate resources. Obviously there's health and then there's your cooldowns. By pressing the X button, if you're playing this on Xbox, or the square button if you're playing this on PlayStation, it fires a short range shotgun that is incredibly strong and it has a pretty long cooldown. You're also able to unleash this big area effect cross that shoots out electricity by pressing triangle or Y. These cooldowns cycled in affect gameplay a bit, but a lot of times just teleporting to opponents, finishing off that next really long combo, that blew people up faster. And because of the takedown system, a lot of times you're completely immune to damage when it's really most essential. Because as you stagger people, they start to flash. When you press the attack button from then on out, you rip them to shreds and you get full health from it. Straight up, every enemy encounter in this game is pretty much just trying to bounce from the weakest opponents to completely charge myself up and then going back to wailing on the guy that's actually a threat. This game is just so easy that a lot of times there's no reason to even attempt to explore. The levels themselves are very, very straightforward, but occasionally there will be a little teeny tiny optional chest off the beaten path, and usually they're like 10 feet to the side. I mean, this game is just so basic and so low budget. There are puzzles to a degree, but a lot of times it's just like, oh, you're riding in a train car and you need to try and shoot every single thing to clear the tracks, or, oh, we need to find a recharge station to run a wire and open up this gate. Like, everything about this game feels like it's in such a rush to get you to the end, but then there's just no payoff. Even as I tried to unlock everything in the skill tree, even as I tried to hit max level and figure out all the different cool upgrade combinations, it just felt like everything in this game is style with no substance. Evil West is coming to Game Pass, and I do think if you already have Game Pass, it's completely worth it. I mean, playing the game that you've already paid for, that's a good time. But if you are really going to sit down and pay 40, 50, 60 bucks for something like this, it's absolutely not worth it. Whether you're playing it by yourself or co-op, this is just an interesting experience to look at for about an hour, but finishing the whole 12-hour campaign, to me, it's just not worth your time. Okay, well, we've heard some good and some bad, but let's head over to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Evil West a 6 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this video, gamers. If you could please give this video a big old thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. And please do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Man, I really wish this game was better, because it's one of those weird times where I didn't hate this, but I kind of hope we get an Evil West 2 with a bigger budget so we can see what this team will actually do, because this, not quite there. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.